I'm Mike O'Neill with Bench Builders, and we're speaking with thought leaders to uncover tips to help you break down the barriers that are keeping you or your business stuck. Joining me today is Brian Rutberg. Brian is the founder and president of Seattle-based 3C Communications. Welcome, Brian.
Mike, good afternoon, and hello to our watchers and listeners.
Well, it's good to have you back. For those who don't know Brian, Brian was an expert panelist on our webinar series, and I've asked Brian to come back and share how he and his company works with leaders in sales, in marketing, and customer support to build more profitable and long-lasting relationships with their customers. And as we're thinking about how COVID has impacted our economy, it just strikes me, and I hope it strikes our listeners, of how critically important it is to be keenly aware of our customers and the value they bring. So let's just jump right in. Brian, the name of your business is 3C Communications. What does 3C stand for?
Well, one of the joys of owning a business is you get to make these decisions, and you can sort of represent what you want. When I started the business, I referred to it as you've got to create your message, communicate it out, but it's most important to connect with the audience that you want to reach, create, communicate, connect. And over time, that's taken on, my clients have led me in a new direction with it. Now I tend to refer to 3C as the customer connection company, helping, as you said, companies build stronger, longer lasting, more profitable relationships with their customers. But it's all about the customer, whether you think about it with the communications first, or you think about all the things that go into building great customer experience. Let's call it the customer connection company, shall we?
That we will. So, Brian, you've given us some very solid suggestions on how leaders should step back and look at customers, maybe through a fresh lens. If I was to ask you to kind of reflect on the time we've been together, and you were to kind of summarize the things you want to make sure our listeners have in their mind as takeaways, what might that be?
Yeah. Uh, let's start with where we started our conversation. Customer lifetime value, while that classic phrase, necessary but not sufficient, it is necessary. You really should have a handle on what your customers are worth to you and have strategies for increasing that value. Same thing I would say for the other very common measure in my business, net promoter score. The classic question on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend to work with Mike O'Neill and Bench Builders? And if it's a 9 or 10, all good. If it's a 7 or an 8, you consider that neutral. Anything 6 or lower is a detractor. And then you do a little bit of math to come up with your indexed score, and you can compare to others. Every business leader really should have a handle on how their company is doing in terms of monitoring and then over time increasing customer lifetime value. And the same thing with net promoter score, and should have strategies for addressing those folks who fall into the detractor category, because that's not love. The second thing I'd want to take away is, once you've got those baselines, start thinking about everything else you can do to really drive customer closeness and get the customers you most want to engage with you and engage with the rest of the world on your behalf. How do you bring them in? And whether that's doing occasional focus groups or creating actual customer advisory councils or customer advisory boards, thinking about the programs that you run for your customers. Some organizations will find they want to create a loyalty program. Some companies will find that they want to build in sort of off-cycle touch points to connect with key decision makers, just to check in with how things are going outside of a sales cycle. Lots and lots of things that can be done. So start with customer lifetime value and net promoter score. Know those things. Think about how you're going to increase them. Move to greater engagement that's a little harder to quantify with building customer closeness. And then finally, as sort of a corollary to that, think about your own culture. If you've got the right communications to your customers, if you've got the right programs, now think about how your culture uses that information and get used to creating a culture of strong listening capability, because your customers will, if they like you, tell you exactly what they need to like you just a little bit more. So
Very, very
know the numbers, yeah, build closeness, and keep your head on so you can listen.
well said. If there are folks who would like to continue this conversation with you, what's the best way for folks to reach you online?
Yeah. 3C Communications has a website. It is 3ccoms.com. So 3ccoms.com. And through that, you can find the newsletter that I offer once to twice a month. You can find lots of information about the company and my philosophy on building customer engagement. And you'll see front and center that great question: do your customers love you enough? Come find me there, shoot me a note, and let's talk about how you can create more customer love in your environment.
I want to encourage our listeners to do that very thing. Brian, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you to all who have paid attention here. And Mike, as always, thank you for your friendship and finding this topic as interesting as I do.